Hi, welcome to PLP Pathways Webinar number 9. I'm Don Taylor, broadcasting from Main Street Middle School in Montpelier. And I'd like to first thank the Middle Grades Institute and Collaborative for supporting us, as well as the Tarrant Institute for Innovative Education. I'm joined by other educators from around the state who are trying to figure out the best way to implement Act 77 in their classrooms and communities. And I'll let our contributors introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Maura Kelly. I teach 7th and 8th grade humanities at People's Academy Middle Level in Morrisville, Vermont.
And hi, I'm Lindsay Hallman. I teach on the EDGE team at Essex Middle School.
Okay, and hopefully we'll be joined by Allison Gothier shortly from U32. Kevin is actually taking a professional exam this afternoon and won't be joining us. Tonight we wanted to talk about sort of the personal learning framework and that last segment of it, which is the transition piece to it. We also wanted to talk about some culminating events and activities, maybe have a discussion about integrated models of PLPs, and then discuss professional development. So my first question to both Lindsay and Maura is, as we're about 4 or 5 weeks from the end of the school year, our 8th graders are getting ready to go to high school, our 7th graders are ready to move up. What are you guys doing for your transition activities, and how are you integrating that into your curriculum and, you know, kind of wrapping up what you do, but preparing kids for their next life and learning stage?
I can go first.
Yep.
So as far as wrap up on our team, we are currently this week has been the SBACs, but after this week we are just like full on wrapping up our project work for the year, which has really been a large component of their PLPs and their demonstration of flexible pathways and proficiencies. So kids are really trying to finish up products and finalize pieces, and then we're going to be putting together our presentations, because on June 13th we have our annual project fair, and we hold a potluck for our families during the evening, and then the kids do presentations, and we also do a project fair during the school day for other teams and kids in our district to come and see what the kids are up to. And then as far as, I'm also multi-age, so our 8th graders have been engaged in a lot of transition activities. So yesterday they had their half-day orientation, or I'm sorry, Tuesday at the high school. Tuesday they had the half-day orientation at the high school, where they got to explore the possibilities for next year. They've already selected their courses, and they have a number of different activities going on each week throughout the remainder of the year to get them prepared.
All right, and Maura?
So we have, we're a multi-age team, so our 7th graders will be with us again for 8th grade. And we've been really thinking about our 8th grade transitioning to high school. And we started back before April vacation, starting that transition process with them. And I've been working closely with another 8th grade teacher who's on the other 8th grade, 7th and 8th grade team, and with the high school guidance counselor. And so we've had the guidance counselor come in and do sort of an information session with the kids. We then had our kids do go and observe classes. We had our students select their courses with the guidance counselor and then get their schedules just last week and sort of learn how to read their schedules and know what's going on. And then this week on Tuesday, we had our 8th grade students go to their high school TA, and in People's Academy High School, they have multi-age TAs, and you stay with the same advisor for 4 years. So our 8th graders went up and were with the students that are going to be in their TA next year, and they sat in on a TA. They got to go to lunch with their advisory, and then they also did a panel of high school students talking about sort of the importance of inclusion and culture at the high school level. And so that was really great that happened this week. And then in June, our 8th graders are going to go and meet with their high school teachers, or their TA, and they're going to do a roundtable presentation of their portfolio as a way to sort of get to know their advisor a little better, to have the advisor, see the portfolio, understand where the students' goals are, look at some academic pieces of work. And that's going to be a really big focus of the conversation that they're going to be having about transitioning. And that's, and we're having the high school, we're having the 8th grade students actually going to the high school for those conversations. So it'll be taking place in the high school.
Okay. So I just wrote down about 20 things that I need to be improving in our end of the year. But I'm also wondering if there's a resource that we could create with a list of all these ideas, because so I have a question. We do step up day at the end of the school year, right? Which is at the, like, after graduation, they do step up day. But Lindsay, you said you've already had your kids go over there, right?
Yeah, they had a half-day orientation day on this week, and that's been something that's newer in the last few years, which has been really helpful. It's a day where I don't think many of the high schoolers are on campus, but they have their peer helpers giving the 8th graders tours. They hear from all of the 9th grade core teachers. They see the Arts Academy, all the different academies within Essex High School. Do
you think sorry to interrupt, but do you think that is more effective to have it not so much as an end of the year activity, but, like maybe 6 weeks before, so that the kids take it a little bit more, not to say not seriously, but it's more organized and more structured? Do you think that's beneficial?
I definitely do. I think that it helps, for the kids that are feeling particularly anxious about the transition. I think the sooner the better, actually. If it was like, we start our process probably around February with course, or January or February with the course selection. I think it was January, the course selection. And then they hear, the people from the high school come here. This was like the first time that they went there. And I think that really helps to bridge the gap, so they can understand that it's not this big scary place, and that they talk with other students that have been there in their shoes. And I think it needs to happen as early as possible, because I think the transition actually from 8th grade to high school is pretty significant. It's same with going from elementary to middle, but I think sometimes we just assume that over the summer there's going to be all these changes and everyone will be good to go, and they're really anxious, and they're excited too.
So was it you who does the panel of high school students, or is that Lindsay? Sorry, I didn't catch you.
We do a panel.
They did it too.
Yeah.
So the panel happens at the high school, but it's students who are telling the incoming kids what to expect in the experience. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I guess the other question I had, this idea of they're meeting their TA and they're actually presenting their PLPs or their portfolios
Awesome.
to the TA, which again is just a great way of getting to know somebody. I guess the other thing too, and this is a little bit of a digression, but the idea of this project fair at the end of the year is something that we're trying to integrate, because typically we have like a little graduation ceremony, and we've been trying to integrate the PLPs, a presentation or of either the portfolio or an artifact, to parents in the community. And I think that is something that we need to try and build in down the road, so that kids are not just leaving after graduation, but they have a process where they're doing that transition. To me, the transition is a process. It's not so much about you reach a point and then you're done.
Right.
And now, Maura, are you guys doing something similar with your portfolios? Do you have a portfolio or a project evening or demonstration?
Yep. So one of the things we previously used to do, like a step-up day. So if you were in fifth grade, you go to the 6th grade person that was going to be your teacher advisor for the next year, and you do a get-to-know-you activity. And now what we're doing, and we've been doing it for the past few years, is really doing a portfolio showcase. And that's also where students are sharing sort of their project work that they did that year. And the way that we have it sort of set up is that teachers are able to go and see future students' work and sort of have conversations with students around that. And we invite parents, and I'm not sure how we're going to do it this year. We've been talking a lot about the purpose behind the things that we're doing and what are the outcomes that we want to have. And so we really want it to be reflective about the past year and growth, but then also start thinking towards the future. And so including maybe future teachers into that transition conversation around the portfolio and what's the best way to structure those conversations so that it's meaningful for all students who are involved. And so the day that the 8th graders are going to the high school, our 7th graders will also be doing another portfolio showcase. And the format of that's going to be different from the 8th grade based on sort of just their transition.
And if you could change one thing about your end of the year process or your transition, what would you add or modify or change for the benefit of your 8th graders?
Oh, I think I would like the 8th graders to have some sort of, I think it's important that they're going to the high school and they're using the portfolio as a way to have a conversation about the transition and introduce themselves. But I would love them to do some sort of a capstone project, or, they're walking across the stage and their artifact of learning or the thing that they're most proud of, the goal that they achieved, is up on the screen as they're walking up and getting their certificate. I want us to see that as a part of the process for everyone, for the community, not just transitioning, but also reflecting and showcasing a highlight of their experience at school.
Okay. Same question to Lindsay. If you could change one thing, add one thing, or modify to your end of the year program, what would that be?
Oh boy. I'm trying to think. I do think so. I mean, I would like to see it infused throughout our school, that all of our 8th graders are doing some sort of demonstration of, of their learning or, their goals. For right now, it's just team-based. So like we have an 8th grade graduation for all of our 8th graders, and it's a really nice experience. And they end a day before the rest of the school. So it's kind of a nice way to close out and then have a transition day for the 6th and 7th graders. But I'd like to see school-wide some sort of demonstration of learning. I mean, we have our own team project fair, but I think it'd be so cool if everyone had their 8th graders, or some kind of 8th grade service project that they do as a community to bring them all together. It's so individual by team. So for me, like, I feel satisfied with the way that we end, because I feel like the project fair really is like, is the top for them. That really is their final push. And they feel good about that. But I'd love to see the whole 8th grade community do something together.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we do on our team is we just have a breakfast for all the 8th graders before their graduation. And I think we don't want to forget how important it is to add the celebrations of together. And it would be great, as you mentioned, if we had a demonstration of learning across the entire school, so that, even our 5th and 6th graders could kind of see what the 8th graders have been doing. And then the 8th graders can see how that what they're doing impacts the school community too. I think that would be really important. Those are all really good ideas. And again, I just, we're right in the heart of all that, and we're finishing some things up. And Lindsay, you said something interesting about finishing up these projects. And I might have mentioned this before, but what's happened is I've taken some of your ideas and I went into a kind of a student negotiated unit. I started at the unit level, and we're in the process of actually going through and doing those independent projects. And the question that they had to answer, they had to pick anything they wanted from United States history that answered our year-long question, what are the disruptive forces that affect systems and cause change? And so they've been working on that. But they've also, today we did a peek through the window. I just blatantly stole your phrasing for that. And we had the kids present to each other about their project, and then make a work plan for how they're going to bring that project, to a culmination and then present it. And I just really think how interesting it is when some of the elements of personalization start infusing your curriculum. So one of the things that we did yesterday is we all got together and we developed a rubric for the project. We had a framework, but we had this big discussion about how they wanted to be assessed. And one of the outcomes of that was that they told me that while they would appreciate me assessing some of their writing and some of their research, they wanted to have a voice in that assessment too, and they wanted their peers to have a voice in that. But they also wanted to be the ones who almost solely evaluated their effort on the project and evaluated their transferable skills. And I guess I had just never thought about having a rubric where you have mixed ratios of assessment. So for example, okay, you're writing, I'm evaluating, 75% of that. The kid is evaluating 25%. Their presentation, I'm evaluating, I think 50% of that. They're evaluating 30%, and then the peers are 20%, right? And so it gets complicated, but in this discussion, you realize how they feel about being assessed and also the different areas that they want to be assessed in. And so when we start talking about these personalized and student negotiated curriculums, that's just one element that I had never really considered before. And it wouldn't have come up unless I had asked the kids for their feedback on it. And I just thought that was really interesting. And I guess I'm also wondering how you structure negotiated curriculum when you have kids at all different levels, and how do you bring them all kind of home at the same time?
Yeah, well, I guess first of all, my first question to you would be, do you all still assign letter grades?
No, it's proficiencies.
Okay, all right. Because I was thinking that for us, like a lot, now it's for the kids, it's really become more about the process and the experience. And I don't like, they will work hard because they like really own their work. But like we do, it's mainly transferable skills, and then the writing and like the speaking, listening piece comes through as well. And we have them do a weekly reflection, but I almost feel like the assessment is so secondary to everything else, because their investment is beyond like, like they should be assessing their own effort because that's what they've designed. And so your question was about bringing all of them along. Well, ours is so differentiated in the way that like we give them a weekly goal. So like their goal might be to, create a timeline for the last month with each week and what their, plan is for the week. And then each week they say like what they actually did and what they need to do the following week. Or maybe it's to write a thank you note to their community partner. And I think that like, and we help them with those skills, but everyone for our projects gets to their best place by the end. And some kids maybe aren't as successful as others because they haven't owned their project as much as other kids, or invested in, their energy into it. But yeah, I think I really like working towards the proficiencies because I feel like it gives kids an opportunity to demonstrate proficiency in a variety of ways.
Yeah.
Do you think that, sorry, Maura, I just had one quick follow-up question. Do you think that the kids who don't get to their best place or haven't owned it as much, do you find that through their reflections? Like, do they admit that freely in their reflections? And is that part of the process that you're trying to build in?
Yeah, each week they write an email to myself and Phil, my teammate, and then their family, a member, an adult, a trusted adult, and about how they did on their weekly goals and where they're at and what their hopes are for the next week. And I think that, the kids are pretty honest in those because they have to, because then their families often write back and say, I'd love to see that piece of writing that you're so proud of, or I'd love to help you with this if you need help. But I feel like the kids that don't own their projects, it's not the majority, but it's like, I don't know if they like, you know, I don't know. That is still like, you know, a piece for us is like, sometimes they just need the hook to get them to own it. Like they might not believe that they really actually could meet with a community partner who's going to help them fix up the trails so they can have mountain biking trails at our school, you know, and then when they have that meeting with the community partner, that might be the hook for the buy-in.
Mm-hmm.
Then they're like, okay, now I have somebody else in the community that is kind of relying on me to do my part. Because I didn't really think that the adults at school were actually going to help me do that, you know, because that's not like in their realm of what school normally is. So yeah, I mean, the reflection, I feel like they're pretty honest, but you know, you always have a diverse group of kids and variety of kids who are, you know, they kind of follow the structures to the T, and then there's kids that just do their own, you know, make their own structures.
Right. And Maura, how are you sort of in your projects and your portfolio, how are you coaxing and coaching and getting all those kids to where you need them to be?
I'm doing my best.
Right.
I think it's one of those things like being very clear about where we're going, being very clear about the purpose of the learning and trying to like hook them either emotionally or, you know, having an authentic audience for my students. You know, I think when we ask students, when we make reflecting a part of our practice, which I think, you know, especially with proficiencies and we're reflecting on where we are, what the evidence is of our learning, what it says about maybe next steps we need to take, and thinking about scholarly habits, having kids reflect on their persistence or their engagement or, you know, those different pieces. I think that's really helpful. I do think that they're, you know, I think that can help kids sort of, the learning feels approachable to them because they can see where they are in the process and in the learning progression and sort of anticipate what's coming next. Yep. You know, I think there is a reality of the middle level learner that there are learners who really struggle being in a classroom or, you know, fitting into the structure that we have. And so trying to figure out how do we engage those learners that are really disengaged. And I think it is through more of the transferable skills and talking about growth mindset. So it's not, you know, I'm not going to set a goal because if I don't have a goal, I can't fail. It's about like, what are experiences that we can give to students to say, hey, you had never done this before and you did a really amazing job at this. And that was something that you felt comfortable with. And academically, it was within your comfort zone. So now here's your next task that's a little bit more complex. So I think, you know, I think there's so many moving parts. It's definitely not a one size fits all, but I think that's one of the real challenges is trying to get all of our students and hook all of our students.
Right. And I kind of want to go back to that idea of that community partnership too, because I think when you have community partners, that can really be a way of not only, as Lindsay mentioned, as creating authentic audiences, but you can also have a lot of resources and just the interaction with kids. And those community resources can also be providing those flexible pathways and those opportunities for kids. And that can be important. I also just really think, again, taking that idea of that peek through the window, sort of a halfway point where the kids can present to each other and they can see where kids are in the different stages of their project. I think that's really important, and that was really helpful for some of
have them present to their families too for peek through the window. So it's another way to serve as like, let me talk to you about. I mean, they're not going to be sharing all this information at home about what they're doing. And so it's like, let me talk to you more formally about what I'm learning and what I'm doing and why I'm doing this. And this is how I'm being assessed, or this is what I'm working towards. And at the same time, we also make it another portfolio, you know, like another PLP conference where they're checking in on their goals and they're sharing that as well, because it's so connected to their project work anyways. So we kind of push that in as well. So it's another check-in point.
How do you capture their conferencing with their families? So if you ask them to share with do you even bother capturing it, or?
I mean, we do our own piece. Like we have a little, we have well, we look at Phil and myself, and they do a self-assessment, and then we give it to their parents as well. There's a few of the proficiencies or this, standards that we're looking at in their presentation. And so we go around and we circulate and we talk with each kid. It's a conference for us, but we also just listen in. They might have, their parents are talking to them. So we just kind of listen, eavesdrop a little bit, but also talk with each kid individually. Because we're with them every day. We're seeing their progress. We know where they're at. But their parents aren't seeing this. And the projects for our community are so abstract. And it's not like we're doing this, science unit or this math concept. They're very abstract and they're curious about them. So this gives them a chance to see all the awesome work that their kids have been doing.
And Maura, do you have your kids present what they're doing? As I guess this is also part of the transition, but it's also part of bringing the year to a close. Do you have them present to their parents and families?
We don't, but as Lindsay's talking, I'm just thinking about the importance of, family communication, especially when schools are undergoing transformations and changes, and the importance of making the learning visible for parents as well. I think back to parents where I'm sharing a student work sample or sharing writing pieces or having the students do it at student-led conferences. And the parents are always like, oh, I loved it in elementary school, and they'd bring their folder home every day and I'd open it and I'd see the writing piece and I loved reading the, whatever. And I think we need to create opportunities for families to have those conversations and still see, the poem that Johnny wrote in humanities class, because a 13-year-old is probably not going to take that out of his bag and say, Mom, I wrote this poem today. What'd you do at school today? Nothing.
Right.
What'd you learn? Nothing. How was it? It was boring. You know what I mean? So we have to create those opportunities for families to have meaningful conversations and see the learning that's happening.
Yeah, and I mean, that just reminded me really quickly, we did in my humanities blocks, in our Revolution unit, we did performance poetry, and we worked with the Flynn and did an arts integration piece, and the kids all wrote poems that they, performance poetry, slam poetry in groups, and they performed in trios, their poems, and that was the same day as our peek through we did it intentionally. We had, I might have already said this on another one of our calls before, but we did the same day as peek through the window. So we got the parents there for this performance and the parents were blown away. They couldn't even believe it. And then we had kids that were working with one of our community partners from Vermont Folk Life, and they were filming the entire thing, and they filmed each trio's poem, and then we put them in a Google folder. So for the families that weren't able to come, because we do the peek through the window during the workday, we just shared the folder, and parents were so appreciative. They couldn't, they were blown away seeing their children get up and perform their poems.
That's those are really strong ideas, and in particular, I just kind of wrote down this idea of making the learning visible. I think that's really important. And then here's the title of somebody's next book, Meaningful Conversations with Families, right? How are you going to continue to have those conversations so that you can keep the families informed? And technology is certainly one way, but maybe some of these end of the year performances are another way of doing that. And I kind of know the answer to this, but I need to ask it anyway. As folks are starting to look at organization, and Lindsay, you're an expert at middle school organization. What's your opinion on the whole PLP as a separate class, or PLPs integrated into the classroom? I'll be frank with you. I think it needs to be integrated into the classroom. It's not like people go on vacation and then they wait to come home to Instagram. They're kind of doing it as needed and as is. And I think that's how sort of the way it works. And so I'm a big believer in integrating it, or saying, oh, stop right there, and you need to put that on your PLP because it's really important. But if people are considering at the end of the year how they're going to change maybe for next year, integrated PLPs or separate class, and if you guys could just offer your opinions, that would be great.
I would definitely say integrated PLPs. It doesn't make any sense to have it separate. The only thing that in my dream You okay? You all right? I might hang on one second. I'm going to let Maura talk for one moment here.
Okay.
Okay. I can share sort of my thinking around that. So, you know, I think it's key that it's integrated. It can't be this thing that lives alone in this separate space. I think it's really crucial that in the content areas, we're also trying to implement, you know, the 3 pillars, and it shouldn't be this standalone thing in isolation. I think, you know, if we think about implementing change and sort of what year 1 looks like, what year 2 looks like, what year 3 looks like, I think there are some benefits to creating an intentional space because it forces all teachers to participate in the process.
Hold on, Maura, could you just hold on one second? That was really important what you just said. So when you talk about, so you said advocating change and having maybe a 1 through 5 year plan. And you're saying that by having that separate space at the beginning, and that encourages all teachers to participate, and eventually it would become integrated.
Yes.
I mean, that's really an important idea, I think, because just thinking about it now, I'm wondering if some of the reluctance to adopt PLPs and personalization is a result of people being asked to do it within their own, you know, curriculum time. Okay, that's really important. Thank you. Keep going.
I think sometimes as teachers too, it can feel like I can't do one more thing. You know, my plate is so full. I think those are pretty common things that you hear around schools. And so I think people sometimes can opt out if you're thinking as a system. And so by creating intentional spaces, that can help to facilitate the beginning. That's not best practice, but that can get the ball rolling. And then as it becomes a part of practice and you're seeing, oh my gosh, wait, this makes so much sense. Why wouldn't I be doing this? Like when the kids are asking for it and they're advocating, and you're using reflection techniques in the classroom and those different pieces. And I also think it can help, especially if a teacher is working in isolation, it can help to create some teams, and teams can come up with structures for PLPs. And so it's not the ownership of one class, and it's going to happen in humanities class because the reflections are writing, because we know that, you know, reflections are not just writing, and it can be a video that they're making or whatever it is. So I think we have to be careful about where the slack is picked up if it's not intentional.
Yeah, and I'm sorry that I left very quickly. I'm juggling teacher life and mom life at the same time. Yeah. So what I was trying to, I think I said full integration makes so much sense. But then I was going to say, but I also believe that in order to really demonstrate to the community and to themselves that their PLPs are actually really valuable and important and are, like, you know, authentic and real, they need to have an advisor that actually knows the kid. And I'm not sure if that's where you were going, but it sounds like you have that in your school, Maura, you know, as far as when they get into high school, they're with them for the 4 years. But that is checking in with them around because we do personal goals and we do a personal, academic, and a career-related goal. But their project work might be just wrapped in that. And I just really want someone to be able to be like, hey, is that still your goal? And where are you at with that? And like, is it time to, like, you know, look at it and evaluate, and how can I support you? Like, there needs to be structures in place for this goal setting. And then there also needs to be the structures that are integrated within every class so that when kids, you know, are in the moment and they have a piece of evidence, they want to just put it right on their PLP, like that should just be a natural thing.
Are you advocating, if I heard you correctly, are you saying, let me back up. So in my class, I have integrated PLPs, so it's not unusual. In fact, the project that I mentioned is actually right on their PLP page. Their workspace is their PLP, so we don't have to transfer anything. But are you also advocating that in addition to having the classroom teachers fully understanding each kid's PLP, that they also have an advisory? You know, your TA is looking at your PLP, or there's a second adult who knows that PLP intimately?
I mean, that would be ideal. consistent adult that's, that maybe is outside, and it could be outside the core, teachers or not, but that, I think, many schools either did or have advisories that, where every adult is with a smaller group of students and there's designated time. I mean, we have time in the morning, we do our circle of power and respect. We have about a half an hour, but that's, if we used one day a week to talk about goals and do goal share, but it has to be systematic, because if one person's doing it, then the kids aren't going to buy in because so-and-so is playing a game next door, so
Right.
if it was systematic, then I think there'd be a lot more buy-in.
Mm-hmm.
And do you think that when it's systematic, do you think that there needs to be, for example, okay, every Thursday's PLP day, and do you think there needs to be some sort of PLP leadership within the school that's saying, all right, here's what you want to be doing for the first month. Maybe that's identity, maybe that's biography, maybe that's getting to know you. Would you say that there should be a curriculum or a sort of a step-by-step guide through the PLP for those advisors?
I think it could be team level decisions, but I think schools thinking systematically in structures, I think that there's some non-negotiables that are put out, like all students will be doing student-led conferences where they are showcasing their goals and communicating with evidence with their parents. All students are going to be in the portfolio showcase that we're doing for grades 5 through 8 in December, and the community members will be invited. Also, so there are certain expectations that students have goals. They are collecting evidence. They're reflecting on that evidence. So, and then at the team level, then that can be decided as part of the team culture. How are you going to get students to that outcome? That would be sort of my vision. And to go back to the idea of having two adults or adults outside of the core, we changed our TA structure this year. This is the first year of implementation, where every student has a TA, 2 TA adults. One is a core teacher that's on their team, and one is another adult in the building. So like the wellness teacher and I share a TA. And so she comes to the student-led conferences. She's also with us for what we call academic time, which is our flex block. Sometimes she calls back students to work with, but she's working with some of my students. She's also available during our opportunity time, which is sort of like our goal work time where students are doing projects around the building. She's available for students 5 through 8 at that time. So we've started to think about how we can use adults and have them, and it helps to build the school culture, I really think, and to get to know kids at a deeper level.
So I have a follow-up question, Maura, and again, you're bringing up some really interesting points that I'll be honest with you, I haven't quite thought about so much. So if what I'm hearing you saying is that, okay, the PLPs, right, you need to have sort of a long-term plan, and you need to build in the structures and the systems that are going to enable you to get to that end goal, which, seems obvious, but it might be hard to do in schools. But then this other piece about sudden change and how that runs into culture, and then also having long-term goals that you can base so that you're actually trying to shift the culture. And I just think this is a really interesting concept of the schools and structures and how people are going to get to that full integration. So again, what I'm hearing you is, and both, I think Lindsay, you agreed that it might not be ideal to have the PLP a separate time, but if it's a stepping stone to integration, that might be worthwhile. Also having multiple adults who have access to the PLPs and who can be advisors or in some capacity. And then earlier in the conversation, we also talked about making sure that families are connected in some way.
Right.
And I just think that, this systems thinking, are you getting this from a model, or are you developing this yourself, or how's that working?
No, I'm just a part of a model, I would say. We do, I'm both on my school leadership team, but then I'm also on the curriculum council for our school district. And so we talk a lot about implementing change, breaking it out into a 5-year protocol, or 5-year implementation plan. What are the professional development needs based on where we need to go for each year of implementation? So like thinking really big systematically and like backwards mapping, like this is the ideal, now let's backwards map how we're going to get there and how to make it manageable for teachers so that everyone is participating and is on board and doing the work. And if they're not doing the work, I don't mean that, but is able to complete the tasks. And if someone is struggling with that, how do we help support those teachers so that they're able to move forward in their practice and ensure that we're being successful with the systematic changes that are being made.
And now I have another question for both of you. Is this something that you've been teaching at the Middle Grades Institute, or is this something that's growing into your professional practice and knowledge?
Can you ask that question again?
Yeah.
Sure. So I guess you're looking at big systems changes relative to Act 77, relative to, PLPs and personalization, et cetera. And it sounds like you've developed these 5-year protocols, you're mapping it out. And I'm just wondering, is this sort of mapping out, is this something that you've taught before at Middle Grades Institute, or is this kind of new learning? Or how are you kind of growing and developing into this mindset? Is it through your involvement, et cetera? So I guess what I'm asking is this something that you're promoting to other teachers, and that teachers who show up at the MGI could start thinking about these big systematic changes and how to implement them successfully?
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure how to answer this question, but for me, I think that's the way that my brain kind of works, is in like kind of a systems mapping kind of way. And I was part of the Education for Sustainability Leadership Academy a couple of years ago, and that I got a lot of insight into how systems mapping can support transformation in schools, and how you get, like, basically how you break it down into smaller pieces. And that really supported my learning, because that's the kind of learner I am. I'm a visual, like, kind of put it into pieces, see all the connections, interconnected. I would say at the middle grades, it depends on the person who's attending. Sometimes we have school teams that come, and they really should take time to do that map, to like visualize what is the ideal, what do we want for our young people and our community, and then how are we going to get there. And I like the idea of the 5-year plan. But some people come as individuals, and they really just want to look at how to create an integrated unit in their humanities block or whatever it is. And so wherever they are, we take them and try to help them grow their practice and continue to move it forward and inspire. So I think it really just depends on their reason for being there. Would you agree, Maura?
Yeah, I think, I'm familiar with it because as a practitioner, that's how I've seen our school action plans for, since I've been at People's Academy. And so it's been really clearly laid out. So we kind of know exactly what's expected the first year of implementation. I think, if there is a big school group and they're undergoing they have this huge goal around, I am struggling to come up with one, but it might be they want to implement proficiency-based learning across all content areas and, X, Y, and Z. That might be something that it could be helpful to break it down and say, and it might not be years, but it could even be in the first quarter, this is what it's going to look like. In the second quarter, this is what it's going to look like. In the third quarter. So you're building your sort of professional learning progression in that way.
Right.
Yeah, I was just going to add one more thing. I have found systems mapping to be I'm trying to look for my example here, but I can't find it right now. Systems mapping to be a really helpful tool for goal setting that can be used both with adult learners and and youth, and because it allows you to see kind of all the parts in play and how they connect, and how and then what supports need to come in. So that's the way that I like kind of think, but not everyone does, and so I totally honor and get that. But I've used it as a tool for goal setting, and I think it's very powerful.
I guess, I'm just asking these hard questions because it just seems really interesting how you guys are working so hard on thinking about these long-term structures and how to get to where you need to be down the road and how to build into that. And I guess sometimes I get overwhelmed by the day-to-day teaching. Oh, we have an example.
Oh.
There we go.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I mean, this was like, my question was, how can education for sustainability increase engagement and learning for all members of the community? And, you know, and then I just looked at it, and that was kind of like my goal for this particular, you know, where I was at professionally. And this really helped me understand all the parts and what I have so far, and then what I need. So.
And are you still adding and building to that?
Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, I keep it on my, I obviously couldn't find it for a second, but I always keep it here. And at first, when I first was introduced to this concept, it was very hard to figure out how to make it work. But then now I keep adding, and then you have these new little pieces that connect together. And I find mapping to be a very powerful tool.
Huh. I don't have one, and maybe I should, maybe that probably is the, anyway. So maybe I need to get one of those maps or think about that, because it's just really impressive how you guys are so thoughtful about all the little elements that are then building up to that, you know, to where you want to end up eventually. And the level of planning and integration, I think, is amazing. The last thing before we end here, I know it's a beautiful afternoon. The last thing, just professional development opportunities. Again, I want to just give a shout out to the Middle Grades Institute, which is happening June 26th through June 30th at Champlain College. And ironically, Lindsay, you were talking about the Vermont Folk Life Center, and I had just mentioned to Maura before the call started that I visited the Vermont Folk Life's website, and they have a ton of offerings for educators. And
have you done them?
What's that?
I would highly recommend the Discovering Community in the week-long intensive or institute. I did last summer, and it's, you know, all about ethnography and capturing stories and integrating digital tools, and I have learned so much. That was transformative for me.
Well, I had seen they send out, somehow it came across my desk or my inbox for that exact course. And unfortunately, it is conflicting with some of our other educational opportunities, but I would certainly be interested in taking that down the road. So that's another one. I would encourage people to visit the Vermont Folk Life Center. Also visit the Middle Grades Institute webpage and the Tarrant Institute for Innovative Education. They're putting out some great blogs and information. Do you guys have any other recommendations for professional development that happening this summer that teachers may want to think about?
LAPTA, the Lamoille Area Professional Development Academy, just put out their course offerings for an institute that they're doing in August. And they have a lot around both personal learning, understanding by design for proficiency, you know, curriculum development, and they have a lot of Roland Fellows who are presenters, and that's I just saw that. I haven't looked too deeply into it, but there's some really nice offerings that dovetail with some of the work that we're doing.
Right, and actually some of the folks who are teaching that are from the Montpelier district. So I think Mike Martin, who's the curriculum director here, is teaching one of those, and Mike McCraith, who is the principal at Montpelier High School, who's an expert in social emotional learning. He also, I believe, he's going to be part of that. I also just want to throw out there that the Vermont NEA is supporting a lot of professional development for teachers, and they have a leadership conference August 1st through the 3rd, also at Champlain College, and they're supporting a lot of teachers getting national board certification. There'll also be offerings on personalized learning at that. So if you're interested, that's a great resource as well. I think that's it for. Go ahead. Yeah.
One more that I would highly recommend is Shelburne Farms has the Summer Institute on Education for Sustainability. This is actually their 10th anniversary. I think I went their first year or something, and second year. It's also like a few days at Shelburne Farms. It's restorative, it's inspiring, it's transformative. When people hear sustainability, they often think like science, environment. It's not about that. It's everything from social justice to transforming your practice to, you know, looking at so many, like the systems thinking piece. So I would highly recommend Shelburne Farms.
And I just want to add too, Lindsay, the resource that you presented on the sustainability goals from the United Nations.
Yeah.
We've taken that and we're in the process, or at least I'm promoting that as a foundational document for our social studies curriculum. And I really appreciate that sharing, because it hits so many different important things and across so many disciplines. And so we've put that into our curriculum notes, and we're trying to use that maybe as a touchstone piece. So thank you guys very much. Our next webinar, our last webinar of the year, is actually June 8th, Thursday, June 8th. And at that webinar, we'll be talking about how folks are starting to systematically evaluate their programs and how they're doing with Act 77. What kind of tools are they using, and how are they, you know, figuring out what's working well and what they're going to be changing. Do you have any final comments, anybody? Any final thoughts? Okay. Well, if not, again, thank you very much. I have 2 more pages of notes and thoughts to consider. And again, I'd like to thank the Middle Grades Collaborative and the Tarrant Institute for Innovative Education for helping support this. We're PLP Pathways. You can find us on Twitter and on YouTube. And thank you very much for joining us, and get out there and enjoy the sunshine. Thanks, folks. We'll see you soon.